from the Voice of Orthodoxy, Phoni tis Orthodoxius, the official periodical of the Synod of GOC of Greece, at that time under the presidency of Archbishop Chrysostom Chiousis, issue 811, January-February 1987, page 23. The Defrocking of the Metropolitan of Oropos, Cyprian, the Holy Synod on November 4th, 1986, November 18th by the civil new calendar, defrocked the Metropolitan of Oropos, Cyprian Koutsoupas, and it returned him to the order of monks, because he fell into the heresy of ecumenism and cut himself off from our church. This is a sad event for the history of our struggle, as it has been proven that the defrocked Metropolitan, Cyprianos Koutsoupas, for more than a decade of years managed to deceive the Church of the true Orthodox Christians of Greece. Pretending to be a pure Orthodox Christian, he even managed to climb the ladder of all the levels of the priesthood, becoming a bishop, while his heart was literally being devoured by the cacodic sermons of new calendaristic ecumenism. No one denies that the defrocking of a bishop is certainly something tragic for the Church. However, as we stated also in the event of the defrocking of the former Archbishop Oxentios, often this act of the Mother Church is unavoidable. One such case is that of the here spoken about former Metropolitan and now monk Cyprian Koutsoupas, and we explained the reasons. When a bishop preaches heresy, and more so with a naked head, as Cyprianos did, the Church must take the required measures to protect her flock from the heresy being proclaimed. The most efficient way of reacting to this situation is to cut off the rotting part from her body to prevent the spread of the gangrene of heresy to the healthy members, parts of the Church. This is the way the Church has always worked throughout her ages, long history. In this case, the monk Cyprian believed wrongly, cacodoxed to such an extreme as to preach that the new calendarists make up the saving one, holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, whereas we who follow the patristic Orthodox calendar are not the Church. Oh, what a horrifying blasphemy from the lips of one person who appears as an old calendar bishop. However, there is another reason why the defrocking of Cyprian was unavoidable for the Church. Cyprian cutting himself off from the Church became the cause of a schism and founded by his own brainstorming a so-called Holy Synod of Resistance. When did the Holy Fathers create a similar synod of resistors and give themselves over to collecting and proselytizing the more simple faithful? If the defrocked Metropolitan Cyprian had alone cut himself off from the Church and confined himself to his monastery, the Holy Synod would have shown forbearance, praying for his return, as it does for its other, separated from the Synod, Bishops Gabriel of Cyclades and Akakaios of Diavlia, whom the Synod never wanted to defrock up until this day for this very reason. From the moment, though, that Cyprian conceived the diabolical plan to agitate the Church, founding schismatic parishes in various places in order to beguile people and, even more so, to ordain a host of bishops, then things are different. In this case, the Church, unfortunately, had no other solution. The Church was forced, due to the extreme actions of Metropolitan Cyprian, to go forward with his defrocking. The unfortunate thing, though, is that the now monk Cyprian, instead of repenting and understanding his actions against the Orthodox Church, continues to lure and mislead others into heresy and schism. Just as many other heretics that were condemned by the Church did not repent, Cyprian has not repented. Therefore, the words of the Apostle Paul to Tito, reject a divisive man, after a first and second admonition, knowing that such a man is corrupt and sinful, he is self-condemned, Titus 3:10-11, are now valid for him. And Cyprian, insisting upon the cacodoxy of ecumenism, sins as one self-condemned. We are truly sorrowed by the fall of Cyprian. We are more sorrowed by the fact that many innocent souls are led astray by his new and heretical preachings and are cut off from the Church. We are even more so sorrowed and saddened by the fact that there exist theologians and others who theologize, who, instead of advising the fallen Cyprian to return to orthodoxy, push him on in his delusion, prelest, and unrepentant stance. We pray that this so unpleasant event, the fall of the monk Cyprian, be the saving motivation for the needed questioning of all the true Orthodox Christians who are of healthy faith, and must come to know that heresy can touch the very curbs of our Church if we are not careful. So, a vigilant observation of all heretical movements and views, and a denunciation and obsolescence of every heretic is required, as our Synod very well performed in the case of Cyprian Koutsoupas, whose repentance and return we will never stop awaiting. 5. Thulftai, Decision/1986, in Korydallos, and in the Church of the Holy Great Martyr, Marina, Vasilissus Sophias and Critis Saints, Today, the 5/18th of November, 1986, the Holy Synod of the Church of the True Orthodox Christians of Greece met in an extraordinary meeting as synodical court under the presidency of His Beatitude, Archbishop Chrysostom of Athens, and with the presence of the following members of the Synod, their eminences Metropolitans, Kallinikos of Theotis and Thavmakos, Maximos of Magnesia, Kallinikos of Achaia and all Peloponnesos, Matthew of Ono, Calliopios of Pentapolis, Stephen of Chios, Sara and Oinusis, Athanasios of Acharnae and New Ionia, Justin of Evropos, and Evia, and the following, who were not able to attend, but let the Synod know of their agreement. With the decisions taken, their eminences Metropolitans, Gerontios of Piraeus and Salamis, Peter of Astoria, Kallinikos of Dodecanesos, and Ephthemios of Thessaloniki. The meeting was called to judge the accusations which will be listed later against Metropolitan Cyprian of Oropos and Fili and John of Sardinia, and those bishops ordained by them. 1. Chrysostom Gonzalez, Mexican 2. Nifon Kigudu, Kenyan 3. Chrysostom Koukutopoulos 4. Chrysostom Marlasis, and 3 others who are unknown to us, 1 Swede, 1 Italian, and 1 Austrian, who make up the novel Holy Synod of Resistance, and who did not appear before the court even though they were lawfully summoned to appear, as is shown by the receipt of delivery by the bailiff of Athens, Evangelos Mumelas. Having verified the legal quorum and following the usual prayer, His Beatitude Archbishop Chrysostom of Athens and President of the Holy Synod announced the beginning of the session. The duty of secretary was placed upon the chief secretary of the Holy Synod, His Eminence Metropolitan Kallinikos, later Archbishop Kallinikos of Athens, of Achaia and all Peloponnesos, who read the indictment, which reads as follows. All of the accused, A, fell from the Orthodox faith given to us by the holy and God-bearing fathers of the Church, and the decision of the Holy Synods of our Church of the years 1935, 1950, and 1974, and embraced ecumenistic orthodoxies, according to which the schismatic new calendarists make up the Yao traditional one, holy, Catholic, and Apostolic Church, which is a treasury of saving grace and an ark of salvation, and that our Church of the True Orthodox Christians is not the Church. B. Give the holy mysteries of our Church without distinction and examination to the innovators, schismatic and ecumenist new calendarists. C. Cut themselves off from our Church and set up their own altar and the so-called Holy Synod of Yao Resistance, with the members of this synod being the Metropolitan Cyprian of Oropos and John of Sardinia, and those who were uncanonically ordained by them and who make up the other accused. In addition to this, Metropolitan Cyprian is especially accused of having deceived his superior authority and the pious people of our Church of the GOC of Greece for a whole 15-year period, during which he appeared as a confessor of the faith of our Church in order to achieve his ordination to the episcopacy, and later to reveal his true goals, which were the abduction of the sought episcopacy and the founding of a church inspired by his own imagination in order to promote his unorthodox thinkings. Metropolitan Calliopios, the rapporteur of this case, read his proposal, which is as follows. Holy President, holy members of the Sacred Synod, in performing the decision of the Holy Synod of October 3/16, 1986, in which by letter I was asked to make a report on the accused Metropolitan Oropos and Fili, who cut himself off from the Church of GOC, and publicly and with a naked head proclaimed already condemned orthodoxies, I reverently cite the following. His Eminence Metropolitan Cyprian of Oropos and Fili, up until the year 1968, belonged to the schismatic state church of the new calendarist innovators, from which he received the first 2 orders of the priesthood. In the year 1968, on the Sunday of Orthodoxy, Cyprian replaced the new calendar that he was using up until that time in the worship life of his monastery with the old calendar, without stopping the commemoration of the name of the new calendarist, Bishop of Attica Nicodemus, or discontinuing communion with the State Church of Innovators. See the periodical St. Cyprian, issue 52, August 1971, page 51. The reasons that prevented the accused Metropolitan Cyprian from joining our Church of GOC of Greece are described by Cyprian himself in his book, How I Learnt About the Patristic Calendar and How I Returned to It, in which he states the following blasphemous comments. From 1924 to 1968, the Church of Greece is divided. We have the new calendarists and the old calendarists. This is a wound for our Church and the joy of the devil and the heretics. The good-hating devil led the martyrs and confessors of the patristic traditions, the old calendarists, to extremes. I do not hesitate to say that if those blessed ones did not go to extremes, today we would
already have returned to the patristic calendar, and we all would be united and able to fight together against heresies, and especially today papism, that attack us continuously. Those who follow the old calendar began to believe that the grace of the Holy Spirit deserted the official church by its going to the new calendar. Oh, delusion prelest. They also proclaimed that our holy mysteries, are not valid. When I studied the matter of the church calendar, my heart found rest with the patristic calendar. And when God made me worthy of becoming a monk in 1961 in the newly founded monastery of Saint Cyprian and Justina in Fili of Attica, even then more so did I desire to return to the patristic calendar. That which made me delay and hold off from returning to the patristic calendar was the fanaticism and extremism of the old calendarists. I wanted to follow the old calendar in 1964 to 1965, but I didn't do it because they wanted me to make a confession of faith and to renounce the official church. That convulsed me and I held off. After that again, my desire for the old calendar was pressuring me to return to it. The visit during that same year of a clergyman of the old calendar to our monastery who told me that the mysteries of the official church are without sanctifying grace disturbed me. I threw him out of our monastery, and once again I delayed. The same thing happened to me again in 1967. Someone can often see very sad things in people of Christ, in the continuators of his saving work. While they, the old calendarists, received their episcopal ordinations from bishops of rocor that are in communion with the new calendarists, they convince the simple but holy and pious people that follow them that the new calendar leads people to hell. In this way, they make people fanatical, and many of them look at their brothers as enemies and damned, while they considered themselves as saved. The opposite of what someone should believe, in other words, that all the others will be saved and only I will be damned. As far as the Matthewite group, what can I say? They are known for their spiritual delusion, prelest, while they have an uncanonical origin of their ordinations by being ordained by one bishop. They are totally unapproachable and remain closed into their prelest and their extremes. They do not accept at all the mysteries of the official church. They rechristmate the faithful when they return to the old calendar from the new, and they reordain the clergy. Oh, what a great blasphemy against the Holy Spirit! Oh, prelest! Oh, condemnation for those people! Their spiritual delusions and extremisms make a greater gulf of separation and do not allow anyone to cross the bridge. How much the devil deceives them! All the Orthodox churches, the Patriarchate of Jerusalem, the monasteries of Mount Athos, while being with the traditional patristic calendar, are in communion with the official church, while they, the old calendarists, totally deny this. Since the other sister churches did not condemn this act of the official Church of Greece, how can we stand up and condemn it? The most prudent and wisest for all those who love the patristic calendar would be for us to follow it without dividing ourselves from the mother official Church of Greece. Finally, on January 3/16, he, Cyprian, stopped commemorating the name of the new calendarist bishop of Attica Nicodemus and joined our Church of GOC of Greece, embracing the widely confessed ecclesiology of our church as laid out by the Holy Synod of our ever-memorable Metropolitan Chrysostom, formerly of Florina, through the encyclical Hash, 13 of the 26th of May of 1950, and which was reconfirmed by the Holy Synod by the encyclical Hash, 1191 of the 5th of June of the year 1974, which states that the mysteries of the new calendarists lack sanctifying grace, and which commands all clergy of the GOC to confine themselves to serving only members of our church. Being totally compliant to the already confessed belief concerning the mysteries of the Sabto, Church of the Innovators, and of not serving the new calendarists, the accused, Cyprian, speaking at or the feast day of his own monastery on October 15th, 1974, while the services were being presided over by Metropolitan Gerontios of Piraeus and Salamis, declared his dedication to the encyclical number 1191, stating that he would no longer serve innovating new calendarists with the mysteries. Having as certain and bearing this orthodox ecclesiology of our church, the accused was ordained Metropolitan of Oropos on February 7/20 by Metropolitans Kallinikos of Corinth and Anthony of Attica and Megaris, who were both known for their dedication to the teaching of our Kyrios Church concerning the lack of sanctifying grace of mysteries of the new calendarists, and if concerning not serving the mysteries for them. Actually, Metropolitan Kallinikos, in the beginning of the year 1983, published the booklet giving an account and on May 24, 1983, the booklet Confession of Faith Epistle in both of, which he proclaims that the Church of the Papal Calendar, as having remained without repentance in the pan-heresy of ecumenism, is cut off from the whole of the Church and is an official heresy, and her mysteries are therefore void. See His Eminence Kallistos, Giving Account, Apologia, Athens, 1983, page 31. In his letter of May 30, 1983, Metropolitan Cyprian writes to Metropolitan Kallistos of Corinth, saying, "By your texts you profess the new to us, teaching of the loss of divine grace by all, the Orthodox Church that accepted the calendar innovation of 1924. Your view is, according to us, unwitnessed, unacceptable, anti-patristic, and as such, anti-orthodox. The holy ecumenical synods, first godly, researched, and traditionally proved, and then decided. You did the opposite, anti-traditionally and without any previous collusion with the other member of our Holy Synod. See Letter of Cyprian. Our positions in issue 191 of the periodical Agios Kyprianos, November, 1984, pages 382, 383. Firstly, in Metropolitan Cyprian's letter to Metropolitan Kallistos, we must note the hypocrisy of Metropolitan Cyprian when he dares to claim that the belief concerning the perdition of sanctifying grace of the mysteries of the new calendarists, which he, Cyprian himself, was saying that he believed and confessed together with the all of the Church of the GOC, right up until that time, is anti-orthodox. Under these circumstances, Metropolitan Kallistos of Corinth sent a declaration to the Holy Synod on October 1629, 1983, in which he objected to those cacodoxies of Metropolitan Cyprian, as well as to certain actions of Metropolitan Cyprian, like that in Fili on the Feast of the Saints, Cyprian and Justina. The leaders there, together with all the bishops that were there, fell into their own anathema and condemnation by praying and serving, by chanting together with schismatic and heretical chanters, not quailing the anathema and curses of the fathers, and announcing his, Metropolitan Kallistos, secession from our church. Our Holy Synod, by its announcement numbered 106 of October 18th of 1983, signed also by Metropolitan Cyprian, punished Metropolitan Kallistos for his uncanonical action of separating himself from the church, but proclaimed its faith, saying, "The Holy Synod of our church being regulated by the dogma of the one, holy, Catholic, and Apostolic Church and the undeceived teaching of her God-inspired fathers, keeps unaltered the confession of faith of our ever-memorable Metropolitan Chrysostom, formerly of Florina, that was made in 1935. And so we consider every ecumenist and innovator according to the dogma to be a heretic and outside the Church, which is the only ark of salvation of the human race, and inside which the grace of the Holy Spirit works in the mysteries." Even though the above profession of faith was made on August 27, 1984, of Metropolitan, Cyprian accepted into ecclesiastical communion, praying together during the Divine Liturgy the ecumenist Patriarch of Alexandria, Nicholas. This event was marked by the Holy Synod sending the following strict document calling Metropolitan Cyprian to explain himself. The document says, "The Holy Synod of the Church of the GOC of Greece during its meeting of the 4th of September of 1984, Church Calendar. Having learnt of your letter #103 and dated August 6, 1984, and found that its content is totally contrary to the known teaching of the Orthodox Church, and that it reflects the pan-heresy of ecumenism, and in combination with the event that on Sunday, August 27th, Church Calendar, you not only accepted in joint prayer the Patriarch Nicholas of Alexandria, but also announced to the congregation with special joy the presence of and praying with that known ecumenist in your temple. And lastly, you traveled to the United States of America without the knowledge and approval of your superior authority, jumping into a foreign eparchy which is under the jurisdiction of our synodical exarch there, even though this is not allowed by the holy and sacred canons. This places your eminence in the position to answer to the synod which calls you before it at 5 p.m. Tuesday, September 19th, Church Calendar, and at the Holy Monastery of the Transfiguration in Glicanera, Attica, to answer to these above accusations. If you fail to appear, the Holy Synod will proceed to try you on the above-mentioned charges in absentia." Metropolitan Cyprian did not appear on the set date to make his plea, and the Holy Synod found the charges against him as substantial and true, and so they punished him at its meeting of September 9th, 1984, with 40 days of suspension from serving, which he did in no way complete. After this, Metropolitan Cyprian formed his own church with a Holy Synod of Fees, resistance with members of this synod being he himself and Metropolitan John of Sardinia, which, on April 5, 1985, disavowed the Holy Synod of our church and cut themselves off with justifications based on lies. Following this rebellion of Metropolitan Cyprian, the Holy Synod, through its decision #28 of February 10, 1986, placed Metropolitan Cyprian under indefinite suspension, sending his case to the Synodal Court, and thus this report was called for. See periodical The Voice of the Fathers, Phone Ton Patteron, issue 13, May-June 1986, page 4. Metropolitan Cyprian did not respect this suspension, not only regularly performing services, but also ordaining while under suspension to the rank of bishop the formerly married Nifon Kigudu and Chrysostom Gonzalez, and later on, Chrysostom Marlisis and Chrysostom Kuskutopoulos, and 2 unknown to us foreigners, Swede and 1 Italian. We can conclude from the above-mentioned circumstances that Metropolitan Cyprian Kutsubas came to the Church of the GOC with a plan to form his own personal church, preaching heretical teaching that is contrary to the faith passed down to us and kept by our church until now. After his accession in 1969 to the ecclesiology of the Church of Genuine Orthodox Christians of Greece, as expressed by the Holy Synod in its Confessions of Faith of the years 1935, 1950, and 1974, which clearly state that the Church of Greece that introduced the papal calendar became schismatic, according to the decisions of 3 pan-Orthodox synods of the years 1583, 1587, and 1593, and that her mysteries lack sanctifying grace, as stated by the first canon of St. Basil. The great Cyprian carefully hid his unorthodox beliefs that he had professed in his book entitled How I Learnt About the Patristic Calendar and How I Returned to It, Pos Ignorisa tu Patreon, Eortologicae Epistrepsa is Auto. See the above pages 1, 3. Only 10 years later, that is, in the year 1979, he convinced the Metropolitans Kallistos of Corinth and Anthony of Attica, and Megaris, who were both strictly dedicated to the Orthodox belief, of our church, and they ordained him a Metropolitan. Cyprian, however, immediately put into use his diabolical plan to form his own church so that he could freely preach his unorthodox beliefs, kakodoxias. While a member of our Holy Synod, he formed a corporation with the title Church of Orthodox Christians of Greece, October 20th, 1982, which is legally represented by its temporary 5-member administrative council, which was elected by its founders and made up of the following monks of the holy monastery of Saints Cyprian and Justina, Fili, Attica. Cyprian, according to the world, Dimitrios Koutsubas. Cyprian, according to the world, Peter Julis. Chrysostom, according to the world, Marlisis. Athanasios, according to the world, Anthony Georgitis, and Apostolos Kagioglu, who is married. Interesting to note is the fact that the above-mentioned, all of which were clergy, who founded a church, were either too embarrassed or scared without any pressure to sign the Wouar document using their episcopal or priestly titles and thus denied their priesthood. The fact that they formed a church proves that already from that time they were preparing their separation from our church, of which Cyprian was a synodal member, thus finding an excuse in the confession of faith of our church, as expressed by Metropolitan Kallistos of Corinth in his works giving an account and confession of faith epistle. Cyprian began to publicly preach with a naked head his kakodoxies, according to which the innovating schismatic new calendarists were members of the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, and that their mysteries were grace-filled. True to these ecumenistical teachings, and in ignorance of the Holy Synod, Cyprian began to accept in prayer with him new calendar, clergy, and to commune laity, which made Metropolitan Kallistos cut himself off from our Holy Synod as to not celebrate with Cyprian. The Holy Synod made Metropolitan Kallistos accountable for cutting himself off from the Synod because he should have, first, as was his responsibility, denounced the unorthodox actions of Metropolitan Cyprian Koutsubas to the Holy Synod. It should be noted, however, that it is a lie propagated by Metropolitan Cyprian that the Holy Synod criticized the orthodox beliefs of Metropolitan Kallistos, which were none other than those of our church. It is clear from everything that we have shown above that Metropolitan Cyprian contradicted himself as far as what he had previously said concerning the grace of the mysteries of the new calendarists, and he signed the decision of the Holy Synod of the 18th of October 1983 against Metropolitan Kallistos separation, in which Cyprian confesses the invalidity of the mysteries of the new calendarists, only to return in a little time to his own expression, which is an ecumenistic,
Orthodoxia and to claim that the GOC comprises the resistant members of the ailing church of the ecumenists, new calendarist innovators. No longer being able to control himself in his death-bearing for his soul tumbling, he reached the point of annulling the Holy Synod of our church and removing himself from it. This unfortunate one founded his own church with a Holy Synod, having himself as president and one other member, the already separated from us, Metropolitan John of Sardinia, who was displeased because the Synod did not ordain as his auxiliary bishop Evlogios of Milan. The two of them then proceeded to ordain 7 bishops. He finally asserted to Archimandrite Paul Strategias that the canonical Archbishop of Athens was Seraphiticus, the Archbishop of the State Church. All of this shows that not only did he fall from our Orthodox faith and move to the heresy of ecumenism, which has as its most important patrons the Mason patriarchs Meletios Metaxakis and Athenagoras Spirou, but also the swindling of our church, of which he hypocritically accepted the faith and teaching up until the time he could accomplish what he desired, which was his episcopal ordination. He also shammed our laity, appearing as GOC. It was later clear that he had as much to do with GOC as those Uniates wolves, disguised as sheep, have to do with Orthodoxy. Metropolitan Cyprian Koutsoupas fell from his Orthodox faith, professing that those local churches that follow the calendar innovation never lost divine grace. But if Metropolitan Cyprian believed that, why did he leave the innovating church of the new calendarists if it was a treasury of divine grace and an ark of salvation? Saving divine grace is distributed to the faithful only inside the fold of the one holy, Catholic, and Apostolic Church, which is the only ark of salvation and which exists in no other church. In this case, since Metropolitan Cyprian professes the Church of the New Calendarists as a treasury of divine grace, then he is stating that this Church of the New Calendarists is not an innovation but rather the continuation of the one holy, Catholic, and Apostolic founded by Christ, and that our Church of the GOC of Greece is a fake and therefore does not save and sanctify its members, as beyond any doubt it then lacks the saving divine grace that cannot be provided by 2 churches, but only by 1. So the institution of walling himself off from the church of the innovating new calendarists, examined under the light of his belief that this church was a treasury of divine grace, and thus that the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church is not a God-pleasing work, but rather, as he says, a movement of Satan, shows that Metropolitan Cyprian Koutsoupas thinks and speaks as a spiritually misled person. The faithful must cut themselves off and separate themselves from every unlawful gathering of the faithful and schismatic and heretical community which comprise fake churches, such as is that of the innovating ecumenist and new calendarists, and unite with the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, and never do the opposite, which is what Metropolitan Cyprian Koutsoupas unfortunately professes. Metropolitan Cyprian Koutsoupas fell from the Orthodox faith when he professed our walling ourselves off from the innovators before the time of a synodal examination is the correct and patristically traditional resistance against delusion, and in no way means that we constitute the Church. Metropolitan Cyprian Koutsoupas blasphemes when he alleges that we do not constitute the Wamas Church. If we do not constitute the Church, then what do we comprise? However, if Metropolitan Cyprian does not believe that the genuine Orthodox Christians constitute the Church, then why did he come to the GOC, which always professed that they constitute the Church? Why did he pretend to believe what the GOC believed up until the time that he was ordained a bishop? Why did he accept to be ordained a bishop by bishops who always profess that the GOC constitutes the Church? If the Church of Christ is made up of schismatic new calendarists, then why doesn't he recognize his defrocking as a priest by these same ones, since he recognizes their mysteries? If the GOC do not constitute the Church, then why did Cyprian desert the Church of the schismatic new calendarists, which he recognizes, and join the fold of a church that he considers non-existent? If we, the GOC, do not constitute the Church, how did Cyprian dare with such ease not only to be ordained a bishop, but also to found his own church and holy synod? Metropolitan Cyprian fell from the Orthodox faith when he professed that this new teaching that the innovators lost divine grace is not God-pleasing nor in agreement with the holy tradition of our fathers, and does not constitute the correct and praiseworthy and thus resultful resistance of the Orthodox, but rather a strange innovation in the struggle against the innovators. The teaching concerning the perdition of divine grace of the mysteries of schismatics and war, heretics is neither new preaching nor first seen, because saving divine grace exists only in the fold of the one holy, Catholic, Apostolic, Orthodox Church of Christ, and nowhere else, is not of novel appearance as it was the patricitic traditional faith that was always supported continuously down to our time by the encyclicals of the Holy Synods of our Church of the years 1935, 1950, which was under the presidency of His Eminence Chrysostom, formerly of Florina, and 1974. Unqualified, rather, and novel are the misfortunate and pouting lips of Metropolitan Cyprian, Kutsubas, that proclaimed the dogma of the pan-heresy of ecumenism. Unfortunately, the cockodoxies of Metropolitan Cyprian are also embraced, as could be expected by those who were illegally ordained by him, like Chrysostom Gonzalez. Chrysostom Gonzalez, in a letter that he wrote to the formidable ecumenist and Latin-minded Archbishop Iakovos Koukousis of America, states that he, Chrysostom, read with a special interest and joy the decision of their Holy Synod to embrace the old calendarist communities and bishops of America in a dialogue of love. Chrysostom Gonzalez then speaks poorly of the zealot GOCs when he writes, "Some groups of old calendarists in the name of zealous devotion to the faith went beyond the bounds of dedication and have landed up seeing their new calendarist brethren in a spirit without love up to the point where they question the orthodoxy of the new calendarists, and that they are so foolish as to give dogmatic meaning to the 13 days of the Julian calendar." He continues by proclaiming their new ecclesiology, writing, "We have walled ourselves off from that which our conscience doesn't allow us to accept, and that which we see as unwise innovation. But we never denied the existence of grace in our mother church. We have priests and bishops for the governing of our movement through economia and the need to govern ourselves. We are not another church above and against our mother church." He doesn't neglect to praise the formidable ecumenist, and thus writes, "Whatever our differences may be, allow me to express to your Eminence that I am aware of your noteworthy contributions to the Orthodox Church in America, the increase of understanding of the contributions of the Greek Americans to the social sector of IAA, America, and the witness of the Greek people in Western society in general. It is my wish that to your many praiseworthy achievements may one day be added the achievement of bringing your Orthodox brethren, old calendarists, at least together if not to a union, and who wouldn't want such a thing?" And he finishes by saying, "I, as the youngest and least among the traditional bishops in this country, ask for your forgiveness for any unintentional insult, and I humbly kiss your right hand. The least monk, Bishop Chrysostom of Oropos, Exarch in America of the true Old Calendar, Orthodox Church of Greece, Synod of Metropolitan Cyprian of Oropos and Fili. Letter of July 18, 1986, Old Style. For these reasons I suggest that Metropolitan Cyprian Kutsubas be proclaimed guilty and punished with the penalty of defrocking. A. Because he fell from the Orthodox faith that was given us by the holy and God-bearing fathers, and by the decisions of the Holy Synod of our Church in the years 1935, 1950, and 1974, and he embraced ecumenistic cockodoxies, stating that the schismatic new calendarists constitute the uninnovated one, holy, Catholic, and Apostolic Church, which is the treasury of saving grace and the ark of salvation, and that the Church of the GOC of Greece is not the Church. B. Because he gives the holy mysteries of our Church to innovative schismatics and ecumenists, new calendarists without any discernment in spite of his promises not to. C. Because he cut himself off from our Church together with Metropolitan John, whom our Church made bishops, and they set up their own altar and a holy synod of resistance, and even proceeding to ordain 7 bishops. D. Because for a period of 15 years he beguiled his superior ecclesiastical authority and the faithful and devout people of the Church of the GOC of Greece, appearing as a confessor of the faith of our Church in order to succeed at being ordained a bishop, and after that to reveal his true goals, which were the snatching of the rank of bishop and founding of his own new church that would spread his cockodoxa beliefs. Metropolitan John of Sardinia be proclaimed guilty and punished with the penalty of defrocking for the same reasons and actions as those of Metropolitan Cyprian. Those bishops that were ordained by the 2 above-mentioned Metropolitans, A. Chrysostom Gonzalez, B. Nifon Higudu, C. Chrysostom Marlassis, D. Chrysostom Kaoskutopoulos, and 2 more foreigners, 1 Italian and 1 Swede who we do not know, be proclaimed guilty and punished with defrocking because they embraced the cockodoxa and ecumenical mindsets of Metropolitan Cyprian, and cut themselves off from our Church and accepted an uncanonical and illegal ordination. The actions of the above-mentioned Metropolitans, Cyprian and John, and those bishops who were ordained by them are mentioned and condemned by sacred, canons of the Church, such as Canon 34 of the Quinisext Holy Ecumenical Council, which states, in view of the fact that the sacerdotal canon clearly states that as the crime of conspiracy or of faction is utterly forbidden even by civil laws, it is much more fitting still that this be prohibited from occurring in the Church of God. We too are sedulous to insist that if any clergymen or monks be found either conspiring together, or you engaging in factional intrigues, or you're hatching plots against bishops or fellow clergymen, they shall forfeit their own rank altogether. And the sixth canon of the Synod of Gangra, which commands, if anyone conducts a church of his own apart from the church, and scorning the church, wishes to perform the functions of the church without a presbyter's helping, with the approval and consent of a bishop, let him be anathema. And the fifth canon of Antioch, which orders that, if any presbyter or deacon, having shown contempt for his own bishop, has excommunicated himself from the church, and has formed a congregation of his own, and has set up an altar, and in spite of the bishop's inviting him to return, if he should remain disobedient, and should refuse to obey or even to submit to him, when he calls him once and twice, I let him be utterly deposed, and be no longer accorded any remedy, nor be capable of having his honor restored. But if he should stick to his position, making a lot of noise and creating an upheaval in the church, let him be brought back by an appeal to the civil authorities as a riotous character. See also the 10th and 11th canon of the Synod of Carthage, and the 13th canon of the 1st-2nd Synod, the 14th canon of the 1st-2nd Council, commanding, if any presbyter or deacon, having shown contempt for his own bishop, has excommunicated himself from the church, and has formed a congregation of his own, and has set up an altar, and in spite of the bishops, inviting him to return if he should remain disobedient, and should refuse to obey, or even to submit to him when he calls him once and twice, I let him be utterly deposed, and be no longer accorded any remedy, nor be capable of having his honor restored. But if he should stick to his position, making a lot of noise and creating an upheaval in the church, let him be brought back by an appeal to the civil authorities as a riotous character. The 15th canon of the same council commands, the rules laid down with reference to presbyters and bishops and metropolitans are still more applicable to patriarchs, so that in case any presbyter or bishop or metropolitan dares to secede or apostatize from the communion of his own patriarch, and fails to mention the latter's name in accordance with custom duly fixed and ordained in the divine mystagogy, but before a conciliar verdict has been pronounced and has passed judgment against him, creates a schism, the Holy Council has decreed that this person shall be held an alien to every priestly function, if only he be convicted of having committed this transgression of the law. Accordingly, these rules have been sealed and ordained as respecting those persons who, under the pretext of charges against their own presidents, stand aloof and create a schism and disrupt the union of the key church. But as for those persons, on the other hand, who, on account of some heresy condemned by holy councils or fathers, withdrawing themselves from Caesar communion with their president, who, that is to say, is preaching the heresy publicly and teaching it barehead in church, such persons not only are not subject to any canonical penalty on account of their having walled themselves off from any and all communion with the one called a bishop before any conciliar or synodal verdict has been rendered, but on the contrary they shall be deemed worthy to enjoy the honor which befits them among Orthodox Christians. For they have defied not bishops but pseudo-bishops and pseudo-teachers, and they have not sundered the union of the church with any schism, but on the contrary have been sedulous to rescue the church from schisms and divisions. In Athens, on the 10th of October, 1986, old calendar, the rapporteur, plus Kalliopeios of Pentapolis. Following this, all the documents of the folder of the case were read, among which were the 15th issue of the periodical The Voice of the Fathers, Fonton Pateron, a letter from Hieromonk Silouan from Italy, in which it is stated that recently the old calendarists of Fili ordained to the episcopacy a man who is sought after by the courts and who does not have a good past, and the extrajudicial reply of the accused Metropolitan Cyprian that is numbered 1/14111986 and has already been published elsewhere. The Holy Synod, having discussed the matter, rejected the complaint in the extrajudicial reply of the accused Metropolitan Cyprian that the Holy Synod unauthorizedly tries his case, since he had cut himself off from the Synod a year before, because the Synod believes that the canonical jurisdiction and authority of the Orthodox Church is never catalyzed by any member who leaves it. For, especially when we are speaking about clergy, the Church that ordains them retains beyond a shadow of a doubt the right to defrock her clergy when such reasons exist. The synod then unanimously decided that the charge that the accused truly fell from the orthodox faith that we have received from the holy and God-bearing fathers, as interpreted in the decision synods of the Holy Synod of our Church in the years 1935, 1950, and 1974, and embraced the ecumenistic cacodoxies, which state that the schismatic new calendarists and heretical ecumenists constitute the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, which is the treasury of saving grace and the ark of salvation, and that our own Church of the GOC of Greece is not the Church. The claim that the accused actually do give the holy mysteries of the Church without discernment and examination to the innovating schismatics and heretical ecumenists was also proven true. The charge that the accused Metropolitan Cyprian of Oropos and John of Sardinia rioting against their superior authority, that is, the synod to which they belonged, and while under the penalty of suspension from serving, did proceed with a coup in which they ordained bishops who constitute the rest of those accused with them, was proven true. Lastly, it has been proven particularly concerning Metropolitan Cyprian that he, for a whole 15-year period, had deceived his higher authority, which is the Holy Synod to which he belonged, and which raised him to the rank of bishop, as well as the faithful and devout people of the Church, of the GOC of Greece, apparently confessing the faith of our Church in order to succeed at being ordained a bishop, and after that to reveal his true goals, which were the snatching of the rank of bishop and the founding of a church of his own thinking for the propagation of his kakodoxa thinking. This mindset of Cyprian is dramatically illustrated in his above-mentioned extrajudicial reply numbered 1/1411-1986, in which he does not only not dare to confess the Orthodox faith, but also continues to characterize the Orthodox confession of faith of our Church that she alone is the one holy Catholic and Apostolic Church, the only treasury of saving grace as kakodoxia. The Holy Synod unanimously judged all the above-mentioned persons according to the indictment, mainly based on the sacred canons of the Church. A. Canon 34 of the Quinisext Holy Ecumenical Council, which states, in view of the fact that the sacerdotal canon clearly states that as the crime of conspiracy or of faction is utterly forbidden even by civil laws, it is much more fitting still that this be prohibited from occurring. In the Church of God, we too are sedulous to insist that if any clergymen or monks be found, either conspiring together or engaging in factional intrigues or hatching plots against bishops or fellow clergymen, they shall forfeit their own rank altogether. B. The sixth canon of the Synod of Gangra, which commands, if anyone conducts a church of his own apart from the Church, and, scorning the Church, wishes to perform the functions of the Church without a presbyter's helping, with the approval and consent of a bishop, let him be anathema. See the fifth canon of Antioch, which orders that, if any presbyter or deacon, having shown contempt for his own bishop, has excommunicated himself from the Church, and has formed a congregation of his own, and has set up an altar, and in spite of the bishop's inviting him to return, if he should remain disobedient, and should refuse to obey or even to submit to him when he calls him once and twice, I let him be utterly deposed, and be no longer accorded any remedy, nor be capable of having his honor restored. But if he should stick to his position, making a lot of noise and creating an upheaval in the Church, let him be brought back by an appeal to the civil authorities as a riotous character. See also the 10th and 11th canon of the Synod of Carthage and the 13th canon of the Second Synod. The 14th canon of the Second Council commanding, if any presbyter or deacon having shown contempt for his own bishop has excommunicated himself from the Church and has formed a congregation of his own, and has set up an altar, and, in spite of the bishop's inviting him to return, if he should remain disobedient and should refuse to obey or even to submit to him when he calls him once and twice, I let him be utterly deposed, and be no longer accorded any remedy, nor be capable of having his honor restored. But if he should stick to his position, making a lot of noise and creating an upheaval in the Church, let him be brought back by an appeal to the civil authorities as a riotous character. Itos, the 15th canon of the same council commands, the rules laid down with reference to presbyters and bishops and metropolitans are still more applicable to patriarchs, so that in case any presbyter or bishop or metropolitan dares to secede or apostatize from the communion of his own patriarch and fails to mention the latter's name in accordance with custom, duly fixed and ordained in the divine mystagogy, but before a conciliar verdict has been pronounced and has passed judgment against him, creates a schism the Holy Council has decreed,
that this person shall be held an alien to every priestly function, if only he be convicted of having committed this transgression of the law. Accordingly, these rules have been sealed and ordained as respecting those persons who, under the pretext of charges against their own presidents, stand aloof and create a schism and disrupt the union of the church. But as for those persons, on the other hand, who, on account of some heresy condemned by holy councils or fathers withdrawing themselves from communion with their president, who, that is to say, is preaching the heresy publicly and teaching it barehead in church, such persons not only are not subject to any canonical penalty on account of their having walled themselves off from any and all communion with the one called a bishop before any conciliar or synodal verdict has been rendered, but on the contrary they shall be deemed worthy to enjoy the honor which befits them among Orthodox Christians. For they have defied not bishops, but pseudo-bishops and pseudo-teachers, and they have not sundered the union of the church with any schism, but on the contrary have been sedulous to rescue the church from schisms and divisions, etc., and placed upon them the penalty of defrocking from the episcopal rank and every priestly rank, and returned them to the order of monks. This decision was made known to Metropolitan Anthony of Attica and Megaris, who was not present at the synodal meeting, and he expressed his total agreement with it, and that he also signs this statement. The Holy Synod, plus Archbishop Chrysostom of Athens, Gerontios of Piraeus and Salamis, Kallinikos of Phthiotis and Thavmakos, Anthony of Attica and Megaris, Maximus of Demetrius and Magnesia, Kallinikos of Achaia and all Peloponnesos, Matthew of Onoi, Calliopios of Pentapolis, Kallinikos of Dodecanesos, Athemios of Thessaloniki, Stephen of Chios, Psara and Oinuses, Athanasios of Ashurnai and New Ionia, Justin of Oropos and Evia,